Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Professor Dr. Erol Tarasti. Welcome to Turkey. Welcome to your speech about existential semiotics. We are very honored to have you today in our Turkey Semiotic Association. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm sitting here in Helsinki in my library at home. So you see the books are there. It's a bit chaotic, but I don't mind. Well, thank you very much for this invitation, for this meeting and lecture. And I want to congratulate you in Turkey for this foundation of this Turkish semiotic circle. I heard it's rather recent, so it's just wonderful thing you have such kind of community among semioticians there, and you can keep together. It's very important in our new discipline after all. So I really want to establish the permanent exchange between the Finnish semiotic society and the Turkish one. So thank you very much, Professor Zeynep Onur, and thank you, Professor Merci, Monsieur le Professeur Dogan Gunay, qui m'a aussi invité, avec lequel je parle français. Mais cette fois, bien sûr, ça sera en anglais. So we continue in English now.
Yes, I would like to introduce you to the audience. Your biography as short as I can. It's nearly impossible to give a short biography of yours, but I will try my best. Professor Dr. Eero Tarasti is a Finnish musicalist and semiologist, currently serving as professor of musicology at the University of Helsinki. He is married to Eila Marita Elizabeth Tarasti, who is also a pianist and musicologist. Eero Tarasti received his PhD degree at the University of Helsinki in 1978 with the dissertation on myth and music on Richard Wagner, Jean Sibelius, and Igor Stravinsky. Dan Tarasti served at the University of Jyväskylä between 1979 and 1984, where he was appointed Professor of Arts of Education in 1979 and Professor of Musicology in 1983. In 1984, he took the position of Professor of Musicology in Helsinki, succeeding Erik Tavats-Jena. Tarasti has held posts as director or president in the several semiotic and musical societies, and since 1970s has written and edited numerous books encompassing a semiotic approach to music. He was the president of International Association for Semiotic Studies between 2004 and 2014. He has been lectured in all European countries and then in United States and South America, China, Japan, and Central Asia. He has honorary doctorates from several very prestigious universities. This is a short biography of Eero Tarasti. Tonight, he is going to give us a lecture related to existential semiotics, which he was in search of signs when they were becoming a sign. I think he will explain you the beginning of this adventure and how it was carried on. The stage is yours, Eero Tarasti.
Thank you very much, Zene, for these extremely kind introductory words about myself, and thanks once again for this invitation to meet all of you. Well, yes, the title indeed is Existential Semiotics, and it certainly immediately evokes something in your minds, I suppose, because existential is a rather general term used also in colloquial language, everyday use. And then semiotics is what you are studying. But then when I combine these two things, it certainly means combination of the, if you think of the European philosophical tradition, this existentialism and existential thinkers, we have this European continental philosophy, as we say it, and then we have the classical semiotics tradition. We have names from Saussure and Peirce until Paris, Greimas, and of course Levi-Strauss and Jori Lotman, Umberto Eco, many famous. So this existential semiotics, simply said, is a combination of these two major paradigms in science. It's something I have been doing now over, I would say, 25 years, which is a short time in science. It's very short. So in science we count, let's say, something which was said 2,000 years ago is like yesterday, if it has some kind of universal meaning. So, but I need perhaps tell a little bit more about my background for you, that you would understand what is the motivation and really foundation of this new branch of semiotics, so to say. I would say that well, for the first, I may have a kind of double identity, because I'm a musician. As Zeynep told me, I've studied at Sibelius Academy piano, and then much music also in Paris and in Vienna, and then in Rio de Janeiro and the United States, Bloomington. But I'm also a scholar, having studied philosophy, sociology, anthropology, aesthetics, and many arts. So it's hard to say what is the major issue there. Of course, when I apply my own theories of semiotics to some empirical field, of course, music is closest to me. And so this existential theory I have already used in some analysis of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Robert Schumann, Richard Wagner, and maybe Heitor Villa-Lobos, the Brazilian, of course, Jan Sibelius from Finland. So there are music examples, but I don't require from you any special competence in musical theory in order to understand me. For the first, how I came this, for me, the philosophy, when I was quite young, still at school, I liked and read only German philosophy. Philosophy was for me the same as Kant, Hegel, Schelling, these thinkers, and then later, of course, Karl Jaspers, Martin Heidegger, and then Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, and then we go to France, certainly Jean-Paul Sartre, Jean Wahl, Simone de Beauvoir, and of course Hannah Arendt, the very great scholar who immigrated to the United States. So, but I was at school only interested in the, and I translated into Finnish more than half of the Wissenschaft der Logik from Hegel, because I really wanted to see what it is, because if you study anything in German humanities, it's stemming from Hegel. But Hegel, some semioticians consider as a conceptual poetry, so they don't take him seriously at all. But this lady Hannah Arendt told that in fact Hegel was the last great philosopher, and his impact is huge indeed. The other philosopher whom I translated into Finnish, and I did it because I thought that I master something only if I get it in my own language, Finnish. Now I write in English, French, Italian, Portuguese, German, but I'm a Finn. I'm definitely bound with my mother tongue, and I think in Turkey you may have the same feeling with Turkish. That's why we need translations necessary. So I translated Martin Heidegger's Sein und Zeit very much, but that happened 1972, 71. And then in Finland, no one was interested in such issue like Heidegger and existentialism and German philosophy, because the whole Finnish philosophy was Anglo-analytic school. We had great names such like Jaakko Hintikka in logics and Jori Hendrik von Wright, follower of Ludwig Wittgenstein in Cambridge, and to whom Wittgenstein gave all his manuscripts, for instance. And then they preserved here in Helsinki, in fact, in the Department of Philosophy, close to my Department of Musicology. Anyway, Finnish philosophy was strongly Anglo-analytic, which did not even accept anything like semiotics. In semiotics, we often speak about a linguistic turn, which meant that all the problems were just based on the use of language. If there were some problems, it was caused by some misuse or misunderstanding in language. That was the Vienna Circle theory in Vienna in 1920s, when this school started. Rudolf Carnap, Frege, and then of course Wittgenstein was also. So that was their linguistic term. But at the same time, we had Fernand Saussure in France, French area, who had his own linguistic theory, and in Russia started already the Russian formalism, 1910s. So that in this Vienna circle, from which this Anglo-analytic school was stemming, was no understanding for semiotics. They said that, remember the word, it was semiotics was something altväterisch, something very old-fashioned and very difficult to understand. So they rejected semiotics and semiotics altogether, which was pity, because that excluded semiotics from the American philosophical scene completely. And even John Dewey, such philosopher, could not do anything against that, but it happened so. But then developed this Saussure tradition, and then from that the whole structuralism, which was okay. I was in German philosophy, and then I came to university and encountered this the Anglo-analytic tradition. I was quite upset because it was a disappointment for me, and then I studied also anthropology and sociology in those years, 1968 beginning. It was the radical year, you understand, when I was in the army in Finland. Okay, but then I read one tiny book in Swedish translation, Myth of Ashtival by Claude Lévi-Strauss. It was first studied by Lévi-Strauss, and then semiotics opened to me via structuralism. And I must still tell you one personal experience, because I wrote a master thesis at Helsinki on the possibility of a structuralist musicology in Finnish. But then I wanted to go to Paris to meet my great idol Lévi-Strauss. So I left for Paris. I was young, I was 22, and I went to Collège de France, to his laboratoire d'anthropologie sociale, and told whom I am, and I want to meet Mr. Claude Lévi-Strauss. To my great surprise, it was possible in 1 week only. I got the appointment. I was helped by the fact that I could bring greetings from a Finnish anthropologist, Elli-Kaija Köngäs-Maranda, wife of Pierre Maranda, the great Canadian, who was a friend of Lévi-Strauss, and so he understood. So I met Lévi-Strauss and showed my dissertation. Of course, in Finnish, he couldn't read it, but he was extremely kind. And then that happened the following. It was an interview. I told him that structuralism of such a peripheric, small country like Finland can be only reflection from such center like Paris. Then he said me, "Non, monsieur, vous avez trompé. Le centre est toujours là où vous êtes vous-même." No, you have mistaken. Center is always where you are yourself. That was for me a very important saying, which I kept in my mind. No, anyway, so I started my semiotics, and then I came to the Paris school. Algida Studian Greimas became my supervisor of my doctoral thesis, because he was, as you know, he was Lithuanian born from this northern corner of the Europe, but emigrated, so he was not able to return to his home country then in Soviet time still. And then I wrote my thesis, Myth and Music, under his supervision, but defended it in Helsinki. But then I would say that my first semiotic phases were first Levi-Straussian and then Greimassian, but then started this third one, which is now the focus, the existential semiotics. Namely, I thought that I want to go to the epistemic foundations of all semiotic approach to see if I could see something new by which I could renew semiotic thinking. It was rather courageous thought. And so I published my first book in the United States at Indiana University Press in Bloomington. It is, I can show it, maybe you know this already, this book, Existential Semiotics, yellow, in the series by Thomas A. Sibiok. You know, Thomas A. Sibiok was very influential Hungarian-American semiotician who established all these publishing series in semiotics, which we enjoy right now, for instance. But this was my first effort. And then this theory was enlarged later years very much. The other book, which is perhaps so far the most substantial, is this one. I show it also here in the screen. This Sein und Schein, Explorations in Existential Semiotics. And you see that my publisher here is in Berlin, Mouton de Gruyter. The title is in German, but the text is in English. They publish only in English. They can't sell in German, these books, namely. And the title is invented by my publisher, Mrs. Ange Beck, because she thought that if I put a German title, then in America they rush to buy it because it's like Volkswagen. Volkswagen, they advertise as something German, so it's reliable. So the same is Sein Shine, but of course it's in English. So these two books perhaps are the most, but if you are Francophonic, you may read my theory also in French version. It's maybe you know, by L'Harmattan, Paris, Fondement de la sémiotique existentielle, by L'Harmattan. And then there are many other versions in many also in Italian, this Fondamenti, Italian version. And then I may just show you, if you like, the close to you, it's in Bulgarian, translated by Christian Bankov. It's Bulgarian. I think this is something like Russian. I can't read it at all. We can't Russian here in Finland. So, and then it's in wait a minute. Albanian is also close to you. Maybe you can. But this is more about my music theory. So
Yes.
So it's Albanian. And there are 3 books in Chinese language, and in China this theory is rather popular. I was just visiting China before this corona pandemic in October 2 years ago, and in Guangzhou and Chengdu, which are the centers, and I noticed that to my glad surprise that it was much, and I have much been lecturing this all around the world, so I have been able to test my theory in most diverse audiences. It's exciting. Even, for instance, like in Central Asian countries, in Azerbaijan and in Kazakhstan and in Iran. I was in Tehran lecturing this, invited by Professor Shairi some 5 years ago, and they especially liked my theory. It's post-colonial aspect, and then the theory of resistance. They liked it very much in Tehran. So that's it. Anyway, now let's go to what it is. I want to show you on screen, if I manage to put these techniques. One model, which was my first, where we can start. Wait a minute. Yes. Can you see it now?
It's coming. Yes, we see now.
Okay. Is it big enough?
It is big enough, yes.
Okay. So this is from my book Existential Semiotics, and it's very simple. You see, there are three circles, which I call by the German term Dasein. By the way, I never translate Dasein into English or French because it has certain very special
Meaning.
subtle nuance. Dasein, as you know, from Sein, you can make in German languages many terms, like Umberto Eco has said that. Umberto Eco once said that if Heidegger were born in Oklahoma, you wonder which kind of theory he would be able to do, because he would have been missing this. Anyway, you see the first circle on the left is Dasein. Dasein is our world, our living world where we are, all the subjects and objects. So subjects, you note, this is big difference between the structuralism and my new theory, namely that subject is revalorized. Subject, le sujet, est devenu le centre de nouveau, is again the center. Our subject lives in Dasein, but then he makes, you saw the first arrow, first transcendental act. He leaves the Dasein by transcendental act, which I call negation. It is called by Jean-Paul Sartre le néant. If you read Sartre's L'être et le néant, his famous study, which is very much stemming from Hegel, by the way, if you like. Anyway, that is the first transcendental act, and the whole this area beyond Dasein I call transcendence. I get back to this notion of transcendence very soon, because it is something radically new in semiotics, which you don't find in any dictionary or encyclopedia of semiotics by Sebeok, Posner, Nert, in anything. It's something new. So our subject makes this act of negation, and then he or she returns to Dasein back. But then, after this experience of nothingness, negation, this Dasein has become something different. I have used here as an example one Italian novel by Cesare Pavese, where an Italian hero leaves his home village in Piemonte, in Dasein, and then leaves for America, and then gets back to his home. But then this home is seen in different light. It is physically the same, but its meaning is different. But then, well, I would say that if my theory would stop here, this would be the same as the existentialism, this famous philosophical movement, intellectual movement, which, as you know, started in Paris after the Second World War by names like Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre. Well, but my theory is not existentialism, and this is by no means any return to existentialism. I'm just getting inspiration only from these great thinkers. Anyway, this journey of subject continues by another transcendental act in which I call affirmation, negation, affirmation. You know, these are logical terms. Negation, affirmation. And by this affirmation, our subject suddenly notices that the universe is not nothingness, devoid of any meanings, but it is full of meanings and everything. It's called plenitude, wholeness. And the term plenitude I found in Gnostic philosophers, after all, and it has, of course, many. It is in Greek pleroma. Pleroma was used, like in music, you know, as Scriabin, the Russian pianist, invented his Prometheus chord, and he called it, that is pleroma. It's a plenitude, fullness. And then our subject gets back to the Dasein, and now it is X. It is something unknown. It's something totally new. We don't know what it is. It's like that. Now, immediately you see that there is striking difference between this model and let's say the previous models in the European semiotics, let's say in Paris School, which is always rather using the so-called semiotic square, with carré semiotic, which is very Cartesian, like Descartes, based on the very distinct logical categories, which are strictly defined, separated. But here everything is in movement, with arrows. There's a motion. Signs are becoming signs, as it was said. So I'm interested in this flow of the universe, how the temporality is important here. The time factor is valid. So I mean that, and then of course this is asymmetric, not symmetrical one. Most of these classical models of semiotics, they are symmetrical, like in Greimas, but this is asymmetrical. Something like we might say Emmanuel Levinas, is philosopher, and his Totalité l'infini. We are going towards the unknown. So, or like in any model of dialogue. You know, dialogue is great thing because we never know to which state it leads. What is the result of dialogue? Mihail Bakhtin, Plato already had this idea of dialogue, and that was the strongly linked with the European culture and European thought altogether when it was invented by Plato. Anyway, this was the first model, and then entirely new types of science emerged in this movement. And I have listed this new category of science. Peirce had also his category of science, but my science are something like as if science which are supposed to be science, als ob Zeichen, you say. Then we have genoscience, phenoscience. We have act science, which are the science in the Dasein, which are actualized science. But then we have pre-science, which are science before they are science, pre-science. And then we have post-science. So we have totally new categories of science, and so this will radically transform our semiotic apparatus, whereby we analyze our universe and all what is included there. But anyway, the new issue here is the transcendence. So what is the transcendence? Now I stop this for a while. Just a minute. Oh heavens. Oops. Now I got. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
I should get rid of this. Wait a minute. Or maybe it is this one. Yes, okay, here we are. So, so transcendence, what it is. Transcendence, you may have heard in philosophy, it has many, many meanings. And I would say that the easiest definition of transcendence is the following. It is anything which is absent but present in your mind. It's absent, but you can think about it. That is transcendent. Well, there are many definitions. Immanuel Kant, in his Kritik der reinen Vernunft, spoke about transcendental and transcendent. And transcendental meant simply this famous das Ding an sich, which was unknown to us, which we could never reach because we can reach it only via our sensory categories, subject, time, and space. You see, whole semiotics is very Kantian after all. Greimas, spatiality, temporality, actuality, stemming from Kant. And of course, Kant via Ernst Cassirer, you know. But anyway, and then the transcendent in Immanuel Kant was just simply this life, death, what is beyond life and death. So it has these two aspects. But let's say in German sociology, which we call this Verstehende Soziologie by Alfred Schütz and Thomas Luckmann, they give the following three examples. the smallest transcendence is, for instance, you wake up in the morning at your home, you want to make coffee, you go to kitchen, you know that the coffee is in the closet beyond, and you have to open the door, and then you find the coffee. But coffee is there. It is a transcendental object, but when you open it, becomes present. So that's it. Second case, you go to street, walk there, you meet some friend or some person. This person is for you transcendental unit. You don't know who he is. That's something important. Like in Saussure dialogue model, I get back to that. And the third one is the biggest transcendence. Let's say you think how the life was in the Roman Empire, or how it was, let's say, 100 years ago in the Europe or so. So you go to something quite different realm. Anyway, transcendence is so it shows that in fact the whole semiotics for me is a transcendental art. Let's think. The medieval definition sign is aliquid stat pro aliquo, something standing for something. Something concrete stands for something which is not present. So we can talk with signs about things which are not present. So they are transcendental issues altogether. So and then I would say that if we think what semiotics is after all, namely, if we take Umberto Eco's famous definition that semiotics is communication plus signification. It means that communication in which two persons have a dialogue. Now I try to get back to my diagrams here. Wait a minute. Share the screen. Wait a minute. I must get it back again here. I'm sorry. Yes, I must get back here. I'm sorry. A lot of things. I should have PowerPoint, but my computer is so new, I don't have yet PowerPoint here. Yes. Here it is. Okay. All right, you see it. This is the text from the Sein und Schein. I just quote myself now in order to get these. But here I explain what is negation, what is affirmation. Okay, then I think about turnaround or Dasein, but that is something which I have no time to go here, but it is. Then I think about values, because values are certainly, values become modalities in Greimassian term in Paris School, and then they become science, so it's very important. And then here is the Dasein. Values which are transcendental are actualized here, you see. The enactment of values. That is a problem whether the values are universal and transcendental, or whether the values are something simply which our community decides. But that is a deep philosophical question already. Okay. But I think I get now the dialogue model. Very soon. Yes, here it is. This is certainly familiar if you have semiotic training. You see this famous model by de Saussure from his Cours de linguistique générale, communication. You see, Mr. A tells something, and what he says reaches the ear of Mr. B, and then something happens in his mind, in his brain, and then he reacts. And so this is a communication. In fact, this is I call it also a transcendental because Mr. A can never be sure whether Mr. B has understood him or misunderstood. We say in philosophy that Mr. B is alien psychic. Alien psychic. That is in German fremdselig. Fremdselig. Mr. A is eigenselig, autopsychic. So the only certain thing for Mr. A is his own stream of consciousness, Erlebnisstrom, they say in phenomenology by Husserl. And Mr. A can only presume that something similar as his stream of consciousness takes place also in mind of B. But anyway, this is an act of which is transcendental, and there is a gap between them, empty space, which must be filled by modalities. Greimas invented, the modalities, which was he said himself la troisième révolution sémiotique, the third revolution in semiotics. And modalities, as you know, are the ways whereby speaker animates his speech, providing it with his will, wish, certainty, uncertainty, fear, hope, anything which we think is quite human. They are modalities, and modalities, they appear in the structure of grammar linguistics, like in French language. If you say, "I hope he comes," j'espère qu'il vienne, you have this subjunctive form in which you have put the verb venir, vient. You don't say j'espère qu'il vienne, but j'espère qu'il vienne. So, by the way, we don't have this in Finnish language. That's why it's very hard for us to learn this practice. But anyway, these are modalities, and Greimas distinguished these vouloir, pouvoir, savoir, devoir, croire. So want, can, know, must, believe, we say in English. So that and by these modalities, this transcendental gap between A and B is filled. And then signification is also transcendental. I already told you this medieval definition of science. It's let me get rid of this. Okay. Oh, here we are. Yes. So that signification, of course, is also transcendental. Now, this was my theory in its first phase when I published it in the Existential Semiotics. But then this theory has been enlarged, and I must say that in between I had my experience in literature as a novel writer. I published 2 novels which were important in my own spiritual development. Namely, this is one. Oops, it's needed. In French, Le Secret du Professeur Amfortas, published by L'Harmattan in Paris. Amfortas comes from Richard Wagner's opera Parsifal. But here, this is a campus novel taking place in the future Americana, utopian Americana, in which Europe doesn't exist any longer, sad to say, but Americana exists, and they have some parts of European tradition in 2 universities, of Southfield and Northfield, and the Professor Amfortas is one professor there. And the main figure is Mr. Sebastian, who comes to meet his uncle Amfortas. And at the end, there is a journey to Finland. So it's totally fictive in that sense. That was my first novel. And then my second novel, which I wrote almost 20 years, is here. This is the French version again, Retour à la Villeneuve. And this is a historic novel starting in the Europe, in Estonia, in a manor called Villeneuve, in which a European family gathers for a long dinner, which lasts 300 pages. So the narrative tempo is very slow first. But the heroes are 3 Italian brothers who come there and who are in love with one girl, Sandra, who is a girl of the daughter of the owner of this manor. And so here I deal with European culture. It's because different countries and cultures are represented by different protagonists. Like Germany is by Professor Eigenauer, who is a very dry German professor type. England is by Mr. Timberton, Mrs. Timberton from the school teachers, and then France is by Monsieur Levallois, Madame Levallois, and so they are kind of caricatures of each, but it's about European culture altogether. But then the second half takes place after the war. It starts in 1939, but it ends in the modern time. And there is the frame story, which takes place in the modern time in a town which I don't say what it is, but it's somewhere in the northern Europe. And there are three young people who are typical modern young people. So, okay, but I don't tell anything. But you have this novel in French. It's also in Italian, published by French version is by Edition Impliquée in Paris, and Italian is by Casa Editrice Pocarabba. An English translation exists, but I don't have yet publisher for it. Anyway, to write these novels, something like Umberto Eco meant me very important exercise in the literary style, and some kind of helped me to move further in my existential theory as well. And so now this larger theory, which is now in that Design and Shine, is very much based upon the development of this notion of being, I would say. Now I'm sorry, I must get back again to the sharing the. Wait a minute. Stop screen share is the. The sharing screen is open. Okay, I try to get it once again. I'm sorry, it is so slow. But anyway, here it is. Here it is. Yes. Okay. Namely, I go to the. Can you see now this?
Yes, we can see.
Very good. Yes, here it was. Wait a minute. Okay, here it's. I have the. Because this is now. I get back to the Hegelian logics. I'm sorry if you are not quite much in philosophy, namely is being. Okay, being, to be. Lettre in French, very important. We have it here. Okay. Aha. Okay, it's already. Well, I hope to get the diagrams. Yes, this is now important. So here we are. Now you have the semiotic square like Greimas. By the way, I've never left definitely Greimasian Paris school. I am still faithful to many ideas in Greimas, like isotopies, modalities, semen analysis, and categories of the and the parcours generatif, which is exciting. So it's important. And here you look in you see there are. If you look at the lowest title of it, you can see an mir sein, für mich sein, an sich sein. An sich sein is from Hegel. It means the things as they are without any determination. Can you see? An sich sein. Okay?
Yeah.
And then when this thing itself gets to its social field, it is determined by other subjects. So it becomes für. By the way, here's mistake. Should be für sich sein, not mich here. Für sich sein. But now I join here these categories of moi and soi, you see. And they, of course, moi means me in English, and soi is society, the social. And I get the categories of an mir sein, so being in myself, für mich sein, being for myself, and then being for itself and being in itself. And this in French, être en moi, être pour moi, être pour soi, être en soi. And so we have 4 cases of this being altogether, and these correspond to Greimassia moralities of will, vouloir, can, pouvoir, know, savoir, must. But then what happens here is the next one, namely the semiotic square disappears and becomes like this. And now this is the most important. There is a set here, and this I call the semic model. And now I would say that my whole present theory of existential semiotics is based on this semic model, and it means that there are set like there are 2 movements from moi 1 via moi 2, soi 2 to soi 1, and from soi 1. What does it mean? I hope I have here the what is inside. Wait a minute. Yes. Moi 1 is just our body as such, primary kinetic energy, desire, gestuality, core body, without any order, any articulation. It may be our chaotic, more or less chaotic corporeal reality is moi 1. Be an mir sein, be in myself. But then when it gets, let's say, educated or gets by habits, like Peirce puts it, identity, personality, stability, it becomes moi 2. So it is our person. But then on the other hand, there is this soi, society, which is something quite abstract. There are norms, values, general codes in soi 1. Like in any society, you can put its norms, if you like, as quite abstract categories. But then they get, so to say, institutionalized in social practices, social roles and institutions here. And so you have here 2 movements. One from quite concrete, the Levi-Straussian, the sensible here, via moi 2, to the quite intelligible, like Levi-Strauss put it, to the intelligible. So movement of, I would say, sublimation. If you are in psychoanalysis, you can you can say that it's like that, sublimation. So the body is sublimated into something pure values, and on the other hand, values are embodied in this direction. They are embodied. They get corporealized. They get more. So there are 2 movements, and this model I call semic, and it represents the human mind altogether. Explains how our mind is social. Namely, the society would never have any impact on our mind unless it would be internalized in our mind. So society is living soi within ourselves. And on the other hand, we have moi. But you must notice that, oops, I went too far, sorry. In every, no, okay, I think I lost it already. Oh, okay, here is the grimace, but there is, okay. Well, I think I stop this. Just, yes. Okay, so here we're back again. So that was what I called semic model, and now, of course, that is not the general theory of the human mind. So this is ontological semiotics in that sense. That suppose that the mind is something like that. It's the model. It's the model hypothesis how the mind is. And but when we are dealing with texts and science, such truly semiotic issues, we are dealing with entities which are representing this semic. And I call them sig-semic, sign-semic. So there are two levels, semic and sig-semic. And it's very complicated. Let's say sig-semic can have its autonomous reality. Let's say music. You take a sonata of Mozart or symphony by Beethoven or Sibelius. It is so-called absolute music. It follows its own laws. And some people deny that it would not have any reflection from this semic reality, our human reality of communication and signification. Some say so, that we have own music is just pure sound. Well, the same is in other non-verbal arts, the same may see in painting, in architecture, in anything, we might say so. So it's a problem how it is represented, and I distinguish many kinds of representation. I think I put, I have one diagram, but it was on page. Yes, I can try once again to show you that, because that is important. Okay, wait a minute. I'm sorry, this is so clumsy. Yeah, but I make it faster and faster, so. Okay. And now I know it's on the page 76. 76. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. The model is here. Representation of Dasein or semic. You see that this is the semic reality of Dasein. Now the Dasein, the circle is now more articulated like this. If you read Plato's dialogues, you see that it's there. And then this is a sig-semic, its representation. Okay. Then we have 76. Yes, these are the cases of how it is represented. So you see that we have spherization. The semic reality can appear as circles like this. That moi one, our body is the innermost. Then comes person, more outer. Sua two is society, and Sua one is there. For instance, you have a good body. You train it. You become a dancer. The dancer goes to ballet school, S2, and then he performs ballet in opera. So aesthetic value. So like that. Or you have other way around. You may have, let's say here, so one might be, let's say, musical value, something beautiful. The beauty, it appears in the conservatory of music. So two, it's practice. Then there is a musician, certain person, moi two, and musician must have a certain body in order to make music. Let's say you are a pianist, you must have good hands. You are wind instrument, you must have good lungs, and so. Anyway, so we have spherization. Then semic can be represented as simultaneization. They can be simultaneously present in the sign. Then they can be localized in the text in different places, so that you may have one text, let's say painting, one corner is there, it might be somebody, other corner is representing society, and so. It can be temporalized. They appear in the temporal order. First body, then person, then practice, then values. It can be so-called Widerspiegelung in the Marxist theory. It is iconically the same. Okay, it can be fragmented. It is totally fragmentary how the semic appears in the text which we study, and it can be autoreflexive, arbitrarity like this. So there is no direct link. It is totally conventional how it is. So, okay, you see. So, oops. Okay, here we are. So you see that we have this many, but I think my time is running maybe rather soon. Or how much time do you have? Not very much, I suppose. I would like to say a few words still about these social applications that might interest you. My still about semic. My most recent essay has appeared in a book. I may have it somewhere, not just now here, but by Springer. Yes, here it is. This appeared last spring. Oops. By Springer, Sounds from Within Phenomenology and Practice. And there I developed this semic study with a particular notation. I developed a special notation how to study it concretely in music, and that goes the furthest I've done so far of my semic study. So I developed that line very strongly now, and I'm rather soon publishing something new in that line. But if I just say something about these two aspects, namely, I have this what I call post-colonial theory. It's appeared already in my first phase, but it has been something important and is still relevant, I would say. Post-colonial, you may have studied it already, but it is something which doesn't concern only, let's say, Europe and South America, or let's say Great Britain and India, such relation, but it is present in every society, which may have one group or class which is dominant, ruling, deciding what is said and spoken in that society, and the other part which is dominated, who are under this power of the dominant and who has to follow its orders. So it is the dominant who has the langue in Saussure, the grammar in his possession, and everyone who wants to communicate must adopt this langue, otherwise it's impossible. So you see, it's a theory of subordination, and that is very highly actual theory, whereby semiotics could help even quite concrete situations in social life, namely how that dominated part of the society can get liberated, emancipated from its position. It can be whatsoever. Now, very much now is speaking about this in feminism, about the gender issues, let's say, how the women have been subordinated and they are liberated by that is very actual still. It continues this fight against the rights of the women. So that's one application field. And now there are alternatives. For the first, it is question of the sign and its structure. We have sign consists of signifiers and signifieds, so concrete signs and their contents. And somehow this must be broken so that it must be exploded so that the new signifieds, new contents can emerge in the situation. Now the subordinated, the dominated can have two alternatives. First one, he can adopt what I call hybrid communication. He or she can adopt the langue of the dominant class and become him herself the non-dominant. That happens very often, and it is one way how persons from that dominated part can get elevated in the society, for instance. But the other one is just that one does not accept this situation at all, and one creates something which is radically new, and he wants to renew the grammar altogether, which is not allowed normally to subordinated people. Because they are supposed to be silent. Silencing is one of the methods how the dominated are kept out of the social decision processes. They are silent. Well, sometimes these silent people they make it this vice into virtue. They say they have what we call tacit knowledge, silent knowledge, which is not expressed quite manifestly. you say. But altogether, the situation, there is a problem. My theory gives the advice that how the signified are just separated, and the new radical new signified is created, which explodes this signifier, and then gradually it must be accepted by the dominant people. Now, for instance, we think of nationalism. It's a very political issue. Nationalism is very often emerging in post-colonial or in colonial situation. Namely, those who are dominating are never national. They are universal. We are the universal, and national societies are just those which are in certain places exotic. They are something different, put in their place in this social order. So, and in that sense, the nationalism is just something which must be supported to get rid of this and to get the rights. But in the second phase, the nationalism has become liberated. It can become aggressive type of nationalism in which it becomes into something negative. So we have this has relevant applications. Post-colonial, and then to conclude, I think my time is over. The theory of resistance, which I present in my Sein und Schein. Now, it's a long theory, but its theoretical idea is simple. Namely, it is supposing that there might be the counter current of science. Normally, science go from left to the right. We have sender, message, receiver. But now it's supposed that it could go other way around, and we could, so to say, look what might have happened if that and that had been done. So what might have happened? This is called in philosophy, in this Anglo-analytic tradition, as the counterfactual statement, counterfactuality. And it means that we see the possibilities there in the past, and there is no reason why the surface of the reality has adopted a certain line. It could have been always differently. But that gives a freedom to our subject to decide what to do, because there is no such law which would determine what will happen in future. It's just like Jori Hendrik von Wright, a philosopher, spoke about the dictatorship of conditions. We think that the conditions are so severe that we cannot do anything here. Very pessimist view. And von Wright thought that something new can be invented in this horizontal appearance line only if that had once happened already in the history of mankind. So we must know the history of mankind, which kind of solution should have been taken previously. But on the other hand, we have this idea that future is never determined, and it's like Hannah Arendt said. I read her in French. I'm sorry. L'improbabilité, l'infini. L'improbability, l'infini. What is the infinitely improbable can happen. Something which is totally improbable can happen. And that is very existential. So we think that the human subject has the possibility always to think that reality can be changed. Something new can happen. That is the message. But of course, my theory is rather long in the Sein und Schein. You have to read the philosophical foundations. I have three forces of resistance. They are being, which is resisting what happens, the appearance. That's already by Umberto Eco as well. Memory. We remember things, like Marcel Proust. Time destroys, memory preserves. André Maurois said that is Marcel Proust's à la recherche du temps perdu, the basic message. And Third category is history, which I said already. What happened in history? Of course, what happened in history cannot be cancelled. We don't have the undo button in history. It has happened what has happened, but we can forgive what happened, and we can think strategies how we can get rid of such let's say traumatic issues in the history. So I think now you see that I try to have these applications also my theory, not only pure philosophy but applications, and of course music is my proper field, but I have no time today. I'm sorry. Normally I illustrate by playing something, but now this is other type of lecture. Well, thank you very much. I think I'm going beyond already my time, so thank you.
We thank you very much. Actually, there are questions that has been forwarded. I don't know either you can read them from, or shall I direct them to you?
Wait,
For
maybe.
example, one of the very interesting question relates to love. Jakub Yeşilyaprak is asking, what are your thoughts on the place of concept of love in existential semiotics if we consider it as a transcendental and philosophical concept?
Oh heavens, that is very difficult, but certainly very important idea. By the way, I have had some pupils here in Helsinki in philosophy studying just love. Like one made a doctor thesis just in Scotland in St Andrew College of this. Well, heavens, what could I say? So that's a very rich area, which is certainly the basic impulse of our activities behind everything. So how could we, which kind of meta language, which kind of concepts we could have of the? Of course, we very often with such thing like love may seem to be transcendental, and we can speak it only with by metaphors, not directly. It's metaphoric language. I had in my theory transcendence, in fact, 3 levels of transcendence. They were just the empirical one, which is the SOA one, the quite abstract values there. Empirical. Then we have what I call suprasemic, the second level in which we are elevated on the level of reflection. We are pondering what happened in semic life. That is suprasemic. Like in Hegel, let's say Wesen, essence, is there. And then I have the highest form, which I once called radical transcendence, but I don't know what is a good term. It is just something impossible to talk directly. I once had a talk with the Romanian mathematician Solomon Marcus, whom you may know, very famous Romanian scholar who passed away some years ago, and he admitted as a mathematician that we can only by metaphors speak of. Let's take a book by something like Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Faust, Faust by Goethe. At the end, there is a famous chorus mysticus, angels. They are singing. The last phrases they say in German is alles Vergängliche ist nur ein Gleichnis und das ewig Weibliche zieht uns hinan. The eternally feminine pulls us towards everything mortal is just only metaphor. So this is the view that anything in the semic or Dasein is just a metaphor of the highest transcendence. That is one epistemological choice which have been taken, let's say, by Dante, Divina Commedia, or Thomas Aquinas, if you like this. And then this Arabian philosophy by Ibn Arabi, Avicenna, you have this idea there. And of course, the Greeks. It's a movement going from up to down. But the other way of transcendence is from down to up, like Sartre, that we find our life so incomplete in Dasein that there must be something better or something which is more just. And so we imagine transcendence. It's our construction. That's how Sartre defined, but I don't know if this was at all answered your exciting question.
Yes, it continues as that Plato had a strong theory that explained the whole universe with the concept of love. But then this theory has been adopted almost only by the mystical schools.
Yes, yes,
Yes, yes.
we should not reject these mystical mystic thinkers, because there might be something very very exciting. So I wouldn't say that they are just unscientific and go beyond, because I've been fascinated by let's say Sufi ideas. Of course, I can't read Farsi language directly, but it appears in poetry, like in Hafid's and many others who have this philosophical foundation, and then of course it exists in the European philosophy very strongly all the time. Uh, this idea. So Umberto Eco also discusses a lot of these agnostic philosophers, and I only make a reference. So it is something we must take into account and not reject, I suppose.
Another question, is there a role or act of hermeneutics in existential semiotics? If there is, what it is? What it is?
Thank you. Very good question also. Certainly. I consider that these philosophical schools or orientations, let's say phenomenology, existentialism, structuralism, hermeneutics, semiotics, they all hold together, so to say, and it is very often very difficult to say what is what exactly. So you may go to a congress of hermeneutics, and there you'll find speech which is quite semiotical by nature. So I don't see any conflict between among these schools, but they are rather they are often united, and especially if I take hermeneutic school, which is strong in, let's say, in Germany. Of course, if I take the Heideggerian discourse, it is rather of its own type. It has its own concepts, which must study separately, and these others. So that's why I must say Karl Jaspers for me is more familiar, because he maybe is closer to semiotics. But altogether, I see much of semiotics like this idea of Vorverständnis, pre-understanding, which is always the reality in which we live, which is before we make any, so to say, scientific analysis of anything.
Yes, thank you. Another question, to translate your book entitled Semiotics of Music, do you need to know the field of music, the theories, terms, etc.?
Oh, that's something which I have. This translation is a very exciting problem in semiotics. I've encountered this many times, because my books of music had been translated. And note, I translate myself in my mind, because I think in Finnish I translate into English already, or in French or Italian. So there is the first translation, and music is full of translation. You know, the Italian famous virtuoso Ferruccio Busoni, also composer, said that the first transcription or translation takes place when the composer writes down his idea in the score. There is all the transcription. But if you want to translate something like semiotics or music, of course, I needed to develop my musical semiotics much terminology of the quite traditional conservative musicology tradition. Notions by Karl Dahlhaus, Boris Safiev, Leonard B. Meyer, Charles Seeger, many others, as an intermediate phase between semiotics and musical analysis. So I needed this phase to translate them. So that's why there was much musical competence and musicological competence needed in that sense. But I also published, let's say, my study on the science of music was commissioned by Mutono Greuter for students. Science of Music. It appeared, I think, 2003. They told me it can have only 200 pages, not longer, and it must be written in such style which is for students easy. So that I tried to avoid, but difficult terminology. But I must say that some semioticians speak about music, but what they say, unfortunately, is not quite interesting. if they don't have the musical competence. It remains on the surface. There is much such writing. On the other hand, very few great semioticians have said anything about music. Yuri Lotman, Greimas never said anything about music. Umberto Eco, very little. Peirce, almost nothing, but Peirce was very musical, by the way. So that I would say that you must have studies in music if you want to study semiotics of music.
Okay, thank you. Another question: what is the place of existential semiotic studies in the age of technology? Or are there any studies related to technology in this field?
Thank you. Very actual. We live the famous digital age, so it is people of my generation. It is not very easy. Younger people live in already this world since their childhood, so they're very easy. But by the way, I was just commissioned an article to a handbook of cognitive mathematics published by Springer, and well, I first tell them that, well, I know nothing about cognitive studies and even less about mathematics. They told me, oh, don't mind, don't mind, it's not so important. You can write. So I wrote my essay on the formalizations in semiotics, because of course the semiotics often appears in a rather technical terminology, technical terms, which is alienating many people from semiotics. They think that semiotics, oh, that is something very difficult, very technical. We don't understand it at all. But I would say that about this digital issue, of course, I'm not competent to say almost anything about that. But of course, it is a reality in which we live and which we encounter. Like in this lecture, I was rather clumsy using this share screen for you. I'm sorry for that. But yes, I'm sure that it is relevant, because in whole semiotic tradition, computers played an important role since the beginning. The idea that you could have such a totally exact manner to study the humanities, let's say. That was the idea by Levi-Strauss and Roman Jakobson in New York in 1940s already. This Copernican revolution. Yes. But I don't know to which direction it might lead, the whole semiotic theory. This is problem. I thank you very much. We must think of this issue.
Okay, thank you. And another question: is existential semiotics ontological or anthropological?
Oh, thanks. That's also quite relevant. Well, certainly ontological or epistemological, or what it is. So we had this question already a long time ago when Umberto Eco spoke about the ontological structuralism and methodological structure. So whether structures are really there, they are, that will be ontological. Or whether structures are just our models, our terminology, our theories, which are either wrong or right. And if they are wrong, they can be corrected. Peirce's famous fallibilism, we make errors always. And also in Hegel's philosophy, the spirit Geist never gets directed to its goal, which is the absolute. It makes errors, and this path of the spirit via errors is just very, very comforting, because we all make errors and we learn from them. But anyway, my semic model is of course a kind of ontological, because I suppose that human mind is consisting always of these four terms, that in order to determine who and what we are, we need these four elements, namely body, person, social practice, and values. They must exist somehow there. But on the other hand, it is, of course, anthropological, and different cultures may have different semic articulations. They are emphasized in different manners. And many of my notions, they have also this cultural meaning, let's say transcendence. I have published 2 essays on culture and transcendence. And I've tried to develop what I call transcultural theory of transcendence. So such a theory which would be valid in all cultures. In all semiotics, this idea of a kind of universality in anthropological sense was present since the beginning. In Levi-Strauss, it was absolutely there when he studied the mythical thought and his mythical structures in mythologic, and even later, say, in Grémassian school in Paris, I think they think that the parcours generative is universal. It functions in every mind. Well, I remember I was once lecturing in Paris about that, and then I said about these modalities that I don't know whether subjunctive modality exists in Chinese language, for instance. Well, there were 2 Chinese girls in the audience, and they were angry with me. They thought that I was somehow deteriorating the Chinese culture, that they would not have these modalities like either we don't have in Finnish language, for instance. So it's not in that sense, but and then Elika Köngäs-Maranda, our great Finnish anthropologist, said that she was very skeptical. She once said in me in Paris that no, my Polynesians, they wouldn't understand what are those Dürfen, Wollen, Können, Sein at all when they live in the reality. So she thought that it's not relevant. But however, I would not be that pessimist. I think that we can develop semiotics as a language of international scholarship, as it was put a long time ago in one congress in Estoril, I remember, by Thomas Sibiuk. So,
Yes, thank you. Another question is like, doesn't the semiotic square express the existence of value?
aha, the semiotic square express the existence of value. Well, I would say the semiotic square as such, of course, was not invented by Greimas at all, but he took it also from ancient antique philosophy. You find it already there, this, and then it appears sometimes in course books on logics somehow. But I would say that semiotic square is just a logical tool to analyze situations in Dasein, and it is very productive and has shown its power in many. But then you must make there what we call semantic investment. As such, the square doesn't seem to say anything about the world, but only when you put there, let's say, nature, culture, life, death, and not nature, not culture, not life, not death, you get to the square, and then there are values, certainly. But I understand that your question is a sophisticated one, and we might see that is there anything, so to say, ideological already to think about matters as semiotic square, S1, S2, non-S2, non-S1. Is that already as such something somehow valorizing the universe, seeing it as contradictory, contrary, and opposed relationships? In my semic theory, I had no time to speak about logged semics. Logged semics are just those logical relations which prevail there, like we have the sublimation, embodiment, we had dialogue, we had teleology, we had resistance, we had fragmentation. These are purely logical relations which exist in any manifest form of semic reality Dasein. So in that sense, you might think that semiotic square is something ideological as such. And some say that, of course, all science is ideological, even the most theoretical one. Some say so. So I
Yes.
don't know. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is your theory on existential semiotics based on Sartre's theory?
Oh, thank you. No, of course, Jean-Paul Sartre was a very great French writer and philosopher, and certainly his L'être et le néant is quite fundamental. But I advise you to read, let's say, first Hegel's this Wissenschaft der Logik, la science de la logique, and then go to Sartre. You see how close this French philosophy is to the German one. So it is totally artificial to think that this French philosophy and German one are living their separate life. They are both European philosophy, and very often they get rather close. Sartre's theory of the néant and his examples, illustrations in literature, also by Albert Camus, the other writer, and many other existential writers. In different countries, we have this, what we call existential style in the arts. I had one essay already in my book, Existential Semiotics, on the structural and existential style in the Europe, and modernism, the Dada, futurism, on these issues. And then we have this existential issue. But I wouldn't say that my theory would be based on Sartre, but of course I find Sartre very inspiring. My theory is not existentialism. It's not written. I remember in Bloomington, my publisher at Indiana University Press, John Goldman, asked me, "What is this existential?" It's something like Henry Thoreau, Walden, American writer, Life in the Forest. He was American. He thought of these transcendental philosophers like Emerson and others. But I would say that Sartre is inspiring, but he's only one source of my own theory.
Yes, thank you very much for this broad speech and your explanations. I think there is no more questions, and we had a lot of time of yours. Thank you very much.
No, thanks very much for listening to me. If you have liked so much, it was very great delight and pleasure for me to meet you. I hope to meet maybe one day in person somewhere when this time is over and we can have real conversations. But anyway, I wish all the best success for your Turkish Semitic circle and society.
Thank you very much. Good evening.